Hey everybody, welcome to this presentation on trauma and the impacts of trauma. My name is Angel. I'm a registered clinical counselor, and at Northern Health I am a clinician and I facilitate the day treatment program for specialized services. We're going to start off with defining what complex post-traumatic stress disorder is, because that is pretty much what we're looking at. And it just refers to a set of mental health symptoms that we can experience after having trauma in our life, particularly if we experience trauma at either an early age or trauma that's been ongoing over a longer period. Some of the symptoms include difficulty controlling your emotions, feeling very angry or distrustful of the world, constant feelings of hopelessness or emptiness, feeling as if you're permanently damaged or worthless, feeling like you're completely different from other people or broken beyond repair, feeling like no one can understand what happened to you, avoiding friendships and relationships, or finding them very difficult and experiencing dissociative symptoms like depersonalization, derealization. There's also like a bunch of physical symptoms, including the development of chronic pain, autoimmune disorders. There's some really cool research out there by individuals like Dr. Kolk, you've probably heard of with Body Keeps a Score, but Nadine Burke as well has The Deepest Well, and it's an incredible book. Physical symptoms like headaches, dizziness, chest pain, stomach aches, regular suicidal feelings. It's also really strongly linked to anxiety, social anxiety, depression, and even some of the personality disorders. This type of trauma that could cause complex PTSD includes child abuse, neglect, abandonment, emotional abuse, physical abuse, ongoing domestic violence or abuse, repeatedly witnessing violence or abuse. We see that a lot with first responders, being coerced into sex work, being tortured, kidnapped, being held prisoner, a history of being sexually assaulted or being made to feel unsafe. One of the important things here is that not everyone who experiences trauma is going to develop CPTSD. There are risk factors that can make it more likely that you'll experience CPTSD, including experiencing trauma at a very early age, trauma that lasts for a long time, where escape or rescue feels unlikely or impossible, experiencing multiple traumas, or when the harm is caused by someone close to you. These are all dramatically increase the risk of developing CPTSD if you experience trauma. Newer research is also showing that intergenerational trauma increases the risk of CPTSD, and that there are genetic factors that are genes that are turned on and expressed to children in those cases, which just makes things a little more challenging. Now, you'll notice that some of those symptoms of PTSD are really similar to those of borderline personality disorder, and not all professionals are aware of complex PTSD, at least not in its entirety, and how to contextualize the symptoms that they're seeing to determine which is what. And as a result, some people are given a diagnosis of BPT or another personality disorder when complex PTSD fits their experience more closely. And there's a lot of professional disagreement in the field about when it's helpful even to diagnose someone with a personality disorder, or when another diagnosis or description is better to use, because the treatment modalities are quite often similar. If you're worried about the diagnosis that you've been given and it doesn't really fit the way you feel, it's really important to discuss it with a mental health professional to make sure that you're getting the right treatment that can help you. And just as a side note, as somebody who has been on both sides of the therapy equation, sometimes it's a matter of finding somebody who can understand the way you communicate, or where you feel safe enough to pull out your concerns in a way that makes it easier for you to advocate for yourself, to be heard. So if you're finding your professional isn't a good fit, it is okay to shop for a counselor that fits you. I can provide more information about that if anybody's interested. Now, treatment options that are available, of course, are going to vary from location to location. As we know here, good luck finding trauma counseling up here, unless you have the money to pay Many people have also found they need to use more than one intervention before they actually find sustainable relief. And that has a lot to do with a variety of different things, but it includes the way we learn, where we need to scaffold our learning. We need to learn things um, over and over for them to really help change core beliefs. And trauma changes the shape of our brain. It actually supports some core beliefs that are very unhelpful. And so trauma therapy can take a lot of time. I listed the treatments in order of efficacy according to research over the last 5 years. So, staying very current with what we're seeing in research findings now. And top one is EMDR, which is using eye movement to help the brain actually process trauma memories so that you can remember things, but you're not feeling them in your body when you remember them. So much like, you might remember um, participating in the science fair if it was fun for you, or gymnastics class you took, like those kinds of memories instead of the intrusive memories that come with trauma. Dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, is the second most effective, and there's some caveats on that. Um, they found it was most effective if the person also had access to a trauma therapist to actually process the trauma, and DBT to help deal with some of the thought patterns that come up. Exposure therapy, if what the person has experienced has led them to have things that they're avoiding, and that's getting in their way of their being able to feel like they're living their best life, then exposure therapy was way up there. Cognitive processing therapy, which is not the same as CBT, stress inoculation therapy has been quite successful with helping people navigate the symptoms of CPTSD. Medication and group therapy. Um, What's even more helpful is when people are using the medication to manage the deep depression or anxiety while they're doing therapy, and then seeing if they still need the medication after, and slowly weaning off of it until they get to a point where they're starting to notice symptoms again. And just a little touching base about flashbacks here. Flashbacks are a real common symptom of CPTSD, and that includes emotional flashbacks where you can experience intense feelings very similar to those that you felt during the trauma, like fear, shame, sadness, despair. And they can be so strong that a person reacts to those feelings, not even realizing that they're having a flashback. And so this we might see overblown reactions to what's actually going on in their life, but not understanding that that trauma is actually replaying for the person emotionally. Um, there's also visual and auditory or experiential, where you can see full or partial images of what happened. You might even notice smells or sounds or tastes that were connected to the trauma, have physical sensations like pain or pressure, and of course, the emotions that mirror the trauma. You might even notice a particular place or person or situation can trigger a flashback, or that just happens at random. And that is part of CPTSD, and it's treatable, like highly treatable. There's a wonderful video I recommend you pull up if you type in 3 meanings of freeze, that will walk you through that fight, flight, freeze. Uh, Really handy for like teasing out how that shows up in relationships. But we're going to go a little deeper than that even. So when we experience danger, our neurological system kicks into gear. Our highest priority drives this, and that priority is to survive. So when we experience danger, we have that need to be safe, and we might fight back. And we tend to fight back when we have the means, right? Training, tools, other people to fight with us, or we know that we're stronger and faster than what we're fighting. Then we fight. As the danger increases, though, we don't have some of those things, right? So it might be safer to flee. And so we will run. And that's often our best chance at survival. Flee can also be mental, not just physical, right? Which means our brain can protect us from some sort of harm by dissociating. Okay, so this is any time the danger is just too big to fight, or we're alone, or maybe we're without the tools we need, or the danger is just slightly bigger than what we have for training tools support. If it's not safe to run away, so again, the danger is increasing, we freeze. Possums are infamous for this trick. They have a really sneaky way of making predators not want to eat them. Um, they just play dead, and you can actually pick a possum up when it's doing this, and it'll just be completely limp. You can throw it, and it'll land, it rolls, it won't even catch its fall, and it'll be fine too, by the way. And then after a few minutes, it just jumps up, shakes violently, and then runs away. So that trick of freezing can trick predators into leaving us alone, because a lot of predators only are interested in live food. And so this is a neurological response that we have when the danger is too big. Holding still and not moving are de-escalation tactics that can actually save our lives. Now, sometimes the danger is much bigger than that, particularly if we've experienced trauma from a young age, where we can learn to survive by appeasing people around us. This might mean that we try to meet all of their needs or at the cost of our own. It might mean that we are hyper vigilant to even the slightest emotional change, and we do everything we can to like mitigate those emotions. It might mean that we try to appear innocent, or we make people feel really important or special, try to make their life easier. This is called fawn. It's that Bambi effect, right? Look at me, I'm not a threat, I love you, you're great, don't hurt me, right? And it's a neurological response. And this is, in this response here is where we see a lot of the symptoms that get confused for BPD, because it's very manipulative, like highly manipulative, and it's usually learned in very early childhood, or um, early in prepubescence. There's a lovely video called Seven Signs You're Not Too Nice. It's your trauma slash fawning. It is pretty powerful, so be emotionally prepared for that. Highly recommend that you check that out to just dive into fawn a little bit more. And of course, it's just the author's opinion, their experience, so it's not going to match yours perfectly. Now, you remember that little triangle we were looking at? The big triangle, sorry, it fits into this little triangle up here, the red part at the top. So that whole triangle we were looking at here, I've now squished into this little triangle to give you a bigger view of what the neurosystem does, right? The whole system has tons of layers. When we're safe in a zone where we don't perceive danger, our neurological system allows us to feel connected, to cultivate friendship, to feel love and hope. And so this is when we have our freedom, we have basic needs met, we have uh, friends, family, community, fun is part of our life. In your body, you're going to notice like a normal pulse or heartbeat, regular breaths, your stomach is loose, your muscles are relaxed. Feel light but grounded. Now, as we sense danger, we might fidget or shake or tremble. And this is our neuroception of danger trying to mobilize a survival response, that fight, flight, fight, fawn, right? This is where we might find addiction or see obsessive compulsiveness or self harm or self soothe or self stimulate. So, for somebody who's autistic, for example, that neuroception of danger might be where the emotions are starting to feel like they could be a problem, or the thought pattern, and you'll see that stimming happen. In the mind, these are the thoughts of I'm unsafe. I need to try things to feel better. Okay, this is where our parasympathetic system is being activated. Our whole self starts to enter into what do I need to survive? Okay, we start looking for that support and comfort. We might start fawning. We might start getting ready to flee, to fight, to do all of that. All right. So the neuroception of danger in here is where fight, flight, fawn starts to activate. Okay. In your body, your heartbeat increases, your breath shortens, your eyes might dry out or leak, muscles swell, you might shake, your nervous system starts to put the gas pedal down. It's gearing you up. It's also disconnecting you from the present, disconnecting you from logical thinking. When you enter the red zone, this is where the action of the fight, flight, freeze response happens, but also there's fold, faint, feign death, and fragment. Terror, panic, PTSD is up here. Okay. we're so terrified our only options are to be highly activated. So we might freeze or fold, we might enter that state where we're feigning death, we might see no way out. And often this activation will shut down the part of your brain that lets you brainstorm solutions. Okay, because we're past that. Our neuroception has decided that we're past that. Um, some thoughts here are like, I give up, I conserve my energy, I feel defeated, I feel helpless, I feel shame, shut down, numb, depressed, empty, personality split. You might feel altered. There's time loss, blackouts in your body. Your immune system slows, your pain receptors flare, thoughts become cloudy. You might find you're immobile, disorientated, disassociated, disconnected. Right? And sometimes this is needed, this brainstorming, shutting off to like give some sort of space to the system to start deactivating, to preserve energy so we can just make it moment by moment. Now, when we're looking at the polyvagal chart, it's the same idea, but it's showing you the flow that is supposed to happen. So normally when people experience some sort of neuroception of danger, okay, they become into the hyperarousal, the sympathetic stage from the safety stage. And as the danger goes up, the dorsal vagal life threat hyperarousal system kicks in. And that's where you see that helplessness, raised pain threshold, depression, numbness, dissociation, and then freeze. And then as they come down, there's shame, shutdown, hopelessness, preparation for death, trapped. And then that deactivation happens. And during that deactivation, right, you're going to see um, the slow shift of all those symptoms reversing. So where as it was increasing, the blood pressure and heart rate changed. There's that fuel availability, adrenaline spikes, oxygen, and circulation of vital organs, blood clotting changes, like all of that. We're going to see that reverse as it decreases, right? We're going to fuel storage happens again, insulin activity again, digestion restarts. You start to salivate again. There's that relational ability and immune response that kicks back in. And then as we continue down the slope, you're going to see the diffusion response, right? Where you get back into being curious, compassionate, mindful in the present, calm, settled. And that's what normally happens. When we experience CPTSD, we're being stuck in this yellow and red zone for the majority of our time instead of being able to really connect into the green zone. It's an amazing system. It's a useful system, but when you experience multiple traumas, it lasts for long periods, and the system can really struggle to recognize when the danger is over. And it might not return to the deactive state completely, but therapy can help. It's not permanent. There is hope. You're not alone. There are places you can reach out for support, including online, thanks to the World Wide Web changing and all the stuff in the pandemic making that happen. So before you can dive in, though, to really healing trauma, it's really helpful to understand the stages of healing. And there's a lot of safety that has to be put in place in order for healing to really occur. And this isn't just about basic health, although that's included, right? Goals in this stage are, of course, addressing that basic health wheel, right? The wellness wheel. So are you eating properly? Are you getting sleep? And addressing those things, making sure we're reducing substance use and reliance on self-medication and destructive behavior to create more safety in the mind and the body. We want to reduce it, right? Not eliminate things, because then we're leaving somebody without coping mechanisms. We want to bring it down and start helping the brain come back to a place where it's not relying on that dopamine. And installing safe coping behavior as we do this. So right as we lower one tank, we want to fill the other, not lower it completely and then hopefully throw some things in there. It's also about educating ourselves about what's going on in our brain. Where did this come from? What is it? Is this part of my coping mechanism, or is this like some moral failing of mine? And like, so doing that education is a huge part of building that safety, stabilizing the person. You'll notice when you look in here, like the task is safety, the time is to do it like right now. This isn't about planning the future. It's not about looking at the past. It's about being in the present and learning how to be in the present. And the focus is really on self-care. It's very time limited, but we'll repeat it over and over and over again. Okay? Like this is repeated. You're gonna go back to this often in your life. This educating yourself and learning how to develop those coping skills and use them in real time. Boundaries for a person in this stage are usually really flexible, but they have a very low tolerance for any kind of conflict. So to guide ourselves from this stage to the next one, it's building that trust in people in our support network, starting to live a full life at a reasonable high level of functioning. And that is what will drive us more into remember and mourn. Seems counterintuitive, right? As we build trust and feel like we're living a good life, we're going to remember and mourn. That's because it's now feeling safer to do so. Okay? This stage is that while we're using the safety strategies, we can share a story with our therapist. We can feel our feelings and still be aware of our body in the here and now. It's about healing those memories, taking all those little incoherent pieces and working them into a coherent whole. Because quite often we have fragmented ideas about our traumas that become our core beliefs, and we want to see all of the context in there and let our brain process it in a whole way. It also helps us to release the body memories and make this process a lot less triggering as we're doing it. So when people use things like cognitive reprocessing, or EMDR or somatic therapy as part of cognitive reprocessing, um, that it helps release it out of the body so that process of remembering a morning isn't as triggering, right? Trauma focused therapy is all about it. There are somatic strategies that really support this stage, and we have those on the last page of this presentation as well. So the goal here is to work in really small steps to integrate those memories, to not experience catharsis, okay, but to integrate the memories. So that's the task, integration. And the time for this is like looking at the past. It's not what's going on now, it's what happened then. And the focus is, of course, on trauma. The time limit is very fixed. We don't want to do this forever. We want to do this in a very fixed time frame. And boundaries typically in this place are very closed, and the tolerance very low. Now, as we start to notice that there's no new traumatic memories to process, and things can come up over time. So maybe right now there's none to process, and 5 years from now something else comes up. Totally normal. Your brain only gives you things when it thinks you can handle them, which is startling, right? Um, so stage 3 is where we start to see meaning and reconnection really happen. So it's about learning who you are. What's important to you? How do you connect with those values? And it's in this stage that you will start to identify some of those faulty coping mechanisms and beliefs and mind traps and building tools for moving forward. Um, this can mean expanding peer relationships and connecting to goals and dreams, noticing intimate relationships are actually vulnerable and intimate, reintegration into social groups and societal participation, and even reintegration into your body. Social activation happens here. We tend to be way more social as we enter into this. Connecting to our culture becomes really something that a lot of people do in this part, and connecting with our communities. The whole task here, though, is reconnection, right? The time is present and future. We're no longer in the past, but we want to be able to be in the present and also be forward facing, thinking about our future. That focus is interpersonal, and the time limit is fixed. You would think that would be not, but it is. And then the boundaries are ongoing changing. So you're going to see some boundaries are going to be closed, some are going to be somewhat flexible, some are going to be semi permeable, and that's okay. And the conflict tolerance in this state is really high, right? So in here, it's where we're remembering without reliving, we're coping with stress without using target behaviors, we're connecting with self and others. And isn't that interesting that for treatment, we tend to do a bit of safety and go straight to meaning and reconnection without giving that space to remember and mourn? I have lots of thoughts about that. Okay, so some of the safety strategies that I highly recommend that you familiarize yourself are creating a visual sanctuary. And so you might hear your therapist go like, we want to visualize a space that feels safe for you. And it needs to be something you can picture in your mind. It has to be not too closely tied to a real place because no one else can be there. It doesn't matter how close you feel to your kids or your partner, this is a place just for you. And it can be magic. Nothing here can harm you, nothing can get in without your permission. So if a bear wanders by, it's just so you can have that joy of seeing wildlife. And nothing can harm you here. And we want to connect to it by identifying the visual. What do I see? What colors are there? And then identifying what you hear. What sounds are in this place? Identify what you would feel with your body or your feet in the sand. Can you feel the cuddle of the cushions that you're sitting on? What is the temperature? And then connect to the things that you would smell. What scents are here? And identify one thing you'd be able to taste. What's your thing you're drinking or eating here that's part of the safety of the scene? And this is somewhere you can go anytime you're stressed out or starting to feel dysregulated. Just picturing that, putting yourself there for a minute and just allowing yourself to regulate. It's a beautiful tool to use. Then there's Vault. This is an imaginary container where you can keep your thoughts, feelings, and memories until you're ready to process them. They have to be safe in this container. You can pull them in and out easily. It's almost magic. You can whip something at the container and it'll just go in there and settle down safely. Um, and when things disappear, it's because you process them. You can't lose things here. Like you put them in there, that's where they're going to be until they're processed. Or you pull them out to process them. Some people like a vault, some people like a pirate's chest, some people want a hope chest, like whatever kind of container appeals to you. Same process. What does it look like? How big is it? When you touch it, what do you feel? What are the colors? Right? How does a lock work? Does it hinge to open up? Does it hinge to open towards you? Does it slide open? Is there a lock? If so, what does a key look like? When you open it, what do you smell? What does it look like inside? So practice putting small irritations in and out of there until it's easy. And then when anytime something comes up you're not ready for, you can put it in there until you can find some safety in your body to sit in it. Tapping, first one side, then the other. I'm holding the laptop where I would do it with two hands, nice and slow. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do it on your knees, tap with your right, tap with your left. You can do it by lifting your heels. Lift your right heel, lift your left heel, lift your right heel, lift your left heel. Do you see what that mimics? Walking, right? That one side and then the other being really slow like that actually helps your nervous system to just come down a little. It allows you to notice that you're in the here and now. You're no longer in a fight for your survival. And so you can just bring it down. It's not going to erase anxiety or depression or destroy your intrusive thoughts, but it will bring it down. The body scan helps you to feel grounded in the here and now. And it has some other strategies around it too. But in this, you just kind of mentally scan yourself from head to toe. I like to do it slowly. Some people find they need to do it fast. And you're just looking for, what is your body feeling? What temperature are you feeling? Are there parts of your body that are experiencing different temperatures? Can you feel your texture of your sleeve touching your arm? Can you feel where the floor is pushing against your feet? Do you have tension in your jaw? Just noticing in the here and now. I use this at night to check in with myself, to identify any areas of tension that I'm going to bed with. Because usually there's a reflection piece for me there. Like if I notice my jaw is really tight, that's my somebody did something against my values. I carry that in my jaw. And so if I'm like, oh, what happened today? Like my jaw's really tight. And I can go through my day, and just because I'm noticing the physical sensation, it's a lot easier to remember what happened. And then be like, oh, somebody was being a bully and I didn't say anything. It's really bothering me. Okay, thanks, brain. Next time, I'll have a plan. I'll remember that it's uncomfortable to speak up, but it's more uncomfortable to carry that all day, right? And so it gives me an opportunity to check in with myself and see what I'm actually feeling at the end of the day, what things are still sticking with me. But it also helps you feel like you're here and now because you're checking in on your body, and that's now. That's not a past thing. That's not a tomorrow thing. That's what's happening for you right now. Another safety tool is dropping anchor or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this allows you to slow down your anxiety or your panic and to come out of re experiencing your trauma into the present. And so you look around, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, okay, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. It's not a spell. If you can't remember which amounts of things you do for which senses, that's okay. Just go through your senses. How many things can I see right now? What do I hear right now? Right? Go through your senses. What does my body feel from the outside? Not on the inside. Not my racing heart, but like I can feel the squishiness of my shoes, for example, because they're squishy on my toes. Right? I can taste my coffee. A little bit about mourn and remember now that we've talked about safety. Mourn and remember is about being able to sit in those feelings and that heartbreak enough to follow through the emotion, not clinging to the emotion and wrapping ourselves in it and drowning in it. But it kind of goes like this. Like I'm remembering a scene, flashback, and it's like, what is the context of that flashback? And allowing yourself to like back up and go, oh, well, all these other things were going on. Okay, what's the context of that? And just backing up and going, oh, like that's the context of that. So when you think about this thing, what happens in your body? Right? Oh, like my heart feels like totally squished and my throat is burning, like I want to cry. Okay, and so what emotion is that? Well, that's sadness and anxiety, right? Yeah, it's like you were sad and anxious in that situation. Okay, and you'll notice that when you name the emotions, they're like this. And when you name them, they just start to expand and open. And then it was a 10, but now it's a 7. And then when you back up and you look at a context even bigger, like what else was going on in there? What part do I not usually think about? Like when I back out, so I'm not here in the memory. Right? And then you start getting the context of like, I get it because that person also experienced pain, right? And that I've remembered this story being connected this way, but these are 2 separate things. Like those things start to be noticed, and it allows room for more frontal lobe sort of thinking. Okay, um, so we want to create a scrapbook basically that tells the story in our mind without only focusing on that one picture that's been the pivot picture for us forever. We want the context. We want the receipts, right? We want the plane ticket to be in there and the time we went to the aquarium, like all of that stuff, not just this one snapshot. We want to integrate it into the whole picture of our life. Because when we have trauma, we're like, oh, my childhood was terrible. You know what I mean? And I'm guilty of this as well because this is how trauma works, right? It's like, oh, I had a terrible childhood. My whatever parent, cousin, whatever was just so abusive. But that's not the whole story. Because even in the worst childhoods and worst situations, there's still joy in there. There was that friend you had that just made you feel so amazing. There was that favorite teacher. There was that time you figured out you could do the weird thing with your thumb and how everybody thought that was funny. Like whatever. There are those moments. So we want to pull out of the trauma memory and put it on its page, yes, but in the midst of all the other pages and see that whole picture. But that requires us to feel the feeling and follow it through. Okay? Not wrap ourselves up in it, but allow ourselves to go like, this was the feeling, these were the thoughts, and then back up and look at a little more of the story and feel those feelings. Does that make sense? Get to a point where we can tell the story without feeling it, not because we're dissociated, we're still in our body, but the memories aren't overwhelming us. Right? We can feel our feelings and we still feel safe and grounded, and we can mourn. We can be sad for ourselves. Not despairing, but just sad. Like it sucks. We shouldn't have to go through that. Okay? And then when it feels overwhelming, you use your tools from the safety stage. So you can heal the part that's not overwhelming. This is recommended to do this with a therapist, of course, right? And if you don't have access, there's a lot of videos on processing trauma memories that can help. And then reconnection happens. And this is like we talk about it a lot, right? Connecting with our values, figuring out what actually matters to us, and really connecting to how those things might show up in different domains if we were being our better version of self, right? So you might be struggling with thoughts, for example, of like not trusting or liking your body, or not trusting and liking other people, or beliefs about not being lovable. These are trauma-driven thoughts. And once we start processing trauma, it leaves space for us to start developing new beliefs that allow us to connect with ourselves and other people in a more meaningful, trust-based, forward-thinking way. And so that's my presentation on trauma. Open to questions, and yeah, thanks for being with me.